So in my last video, I talked about Iran and our bombing of Iran and whether or not it was necessary. My two questions were, did we need to do it? And if so, did we need to do it now? And I felt like at the time, up until yesterday, didn't really have enough information because all the information we had came from the White House. And they have certain credibility problems that I won't go into now, but it made it a little hard to know what was going on. Was what we were hearing exaggerated or, whatever? But I needed more information than what we were getting from the White House to have a better idea what was going on. Now, two things I want to address. I'm going to look at a New York Times article by Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State under Biden, in a minute because he's knowledgeable and he knows some of the answers to the questions I had. One was something I had been led to believe, along with most other conservatives for decades, led by the likes of Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, who pounded us every day with all kinds of lies and propaganda. Uh, we were, you know, drenched in the belief that Democrats were bad and that they were weak, and that instead of bombing countries that needed to be bombed, we should negotiate with them instead. So, as a conservative, I used to recoil at the idea that we were trying to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. When it came out that they were starting to acquire nuclear materials with obviously the intention to make a bomb, I was horrified that anyone would think, well, the best way to solve this situation is to negotiate with them. I thought, who would think the Iranians would keep their word or that they have any um, desire to negotiate? Why would they let us negotiate away their path to mattering in the world, to being a significant player on the world stage? So it didn't make any sense. And I had Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and all these guys feeding this to me all day long, as did all other conservatives of the day. Well, I've come to find out since Trump was, uh, became the candidate in 2016, that they don't always tell us the truth. And I've kind of had this eye-opening experience for the last 10 years. One, Democrats aren't all bad. Two, they don't hate our country. Three, they're not out to undermine the United States. They may have different ideas than we do on a lot of subjects, and we may think those ideas might undermine the United States, but that's not their intention. And when it comes to something clear like Iran having nuclear weapons, they didn't want them to have them any more than we did. But our first reaction is no, negotiate, forget it. Let's send the bombs. And that's what Trump did over the weekend. That's exactly what he did. I'm telling you, he's the talk show host president. So many times he says things or acts in certain ways that make me think he's just parroting what he heard Rush Limbaugh say. So many times. And I honestly think he sat around in the 80s and 90s listening to people like Rush Limbaugh because everything that comes out of his mouth is a kind of a replica of the ideas that they used to put into our heads. And this bombing Iran is one of them. Bomb them, negotiate. You only negotiate if you're weak and a fool. Only a fool would negotiate with the Iranians, we were told. And I believed it. But then Obama came up with this agreement with the Iranians to stop, whatever they did. And I didn't know the details of the agreement. So Anthony Blinken outlines it in this story, which is really good, actually. And it kind of answered some questions for me about why we didn't need to bomb right now. And the whole story is just filled with irony. I mean, the reason we got to this point we're at now is because Trump tore up the agreement when he was president during his first term. In other words, the fire he's trying to put out today is a fire he poured gasoline on during his first term. It's literally was caused by mistakes he made back then. Now, I'm going to show you, if you're a conservative and you still think, well, this agreement couldn't have been enforced and we had no way to verify whether the Iranians were doing the right thing, I'm going to read you some information about that, and I hope it'll change your mind. because it showed me that they really did have an ironclad way of knowing whether or not the Iranians violated the agreement. And if they did, they designed the agreement in such a way that we would have at least a year to respond to it. And we could respond either through negotiations or we could respond through bombs if the negotiations failed. But you should always do the negotiations first. Bombs should be the last resort. The last resort, meaning they're about to get nuclear weapons. They'll have nuclear weapons within 3 months and they still refuse to negotiate. Then maybe you bomb. But we were nowhere close to being only 3 months away. Let me read this. Anthony Blinken, Trump's Iran strike was a mistake. And I hope it succeeds. And I do as well. So he says the strike on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities by the United States was unwise and unnecessary. Now that it's done, I very much hope it succeeds. I agree with that. That's the paradox for many former officials like me who worked on the Iran nuclear problem during the previous administrations. Now get this, if you're a conservative, listen to what he says next and tell me he hates America. Tell me he's looking to, further our destruction. And keep in mind, he's saying this now that he's out of office. He's no longer an official of any government, and it looks like he probably never will be again. So he has nothing to gain or lose by lying. Look what he says. We, former officials in the Biden and Obama administrations, we shared a determination that Iran never be allowed to produce or possess a nuclear weapon. You see, they didn't want him to have them either. It wasn't just us. We were told that by people in the media who earn their living by building an audience and retaining the audience. So they never want to say anything that might make their audience think they're weak because they'll start losing audience members. People will start peeling off. They always got to sound super strong, super confident, and super black and white, everything black and white. Their incentives are making money. Their incentive is not to be accurate. Their incentive is not to tell the truth. Their incentive is to make money by building ratings. And you see this, Fox News lied. They admitted they lied. It came out during the lawsuit with Dominion. And Tucker Carlson is caught sending texts back and forth to Sean Hannity where they're both saying he didn't win the 2020 election, but we have to go on the air and say he did because our audience will kill us if we don't. They literally said things along those lines. So, and that's their motivation, not to lose their audience. They're rewarded for that, and they're fired if they do lose their audience. What's the motivation of a government official? For most government officials, it's to do a good job protecting the American people. And if you look at most of the government agencies, the bottom line in most of them is in one way or another, they protect us. Okay, so people go into government because they want to do that type of work. They know they're not going to be paid well. They know that their incentive is to do a good job, which means be knowledgeable about what they're doing and to protect Americans. If they do lie a lot, their supervisors will clamp down on them. Say, why are you out making public statements that are untrue? You can't do that. That's not true. You got to stick to the facts. So here's Anthony Blinken saying we shared a determination that Iran never be allowed to produce or possess a nuclear weapon. I believe that. I wouldn't have believed it back then, but now that time has passed and we can look back on it and more information has come out, I believe it. He says Iran without a nuclear weapon is bad enough. A leading state sponsor of terrorism, a destructive and destabilizing force via its proxies, and an existential threat to Israel. So he as a Democrat saw all these same dangers that we as conservatives saw. Then he says this. Now here's the kind of a broad outline of the agreement. And when you hear this, you will find out why Iran could not have broken that agreement without us knowing about it and having plenty of time to do something about it. Okay? First, Blinken says it never should have come to this. In 2015, the Obama administration, together with Britain, France, Germany, Russia, China, and the European Union, all reached an agreement with Tehran on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. The nuclear deal effectively put Iran's program to make fissile material, which is the fuel for a nuclear weapon, in a lockbox with stringent procedures for monitoring the program. The deal pushed breakout, the amount of time it would take Iran to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a single nuclear weapon. They pushed that point to at least 1 year, meaning if Iran reneged on the agreement or refused to extend it when certain provisions expired after 15 years, we would know it and have plenty of time. Sorry, I was just looking at the date. We would know it and have plenty of time to respond, including, if necessary, militarily. So the way the agreement was designed only allowed Iran to have a certain amount of this material, and we were allowed to go in and check periodically if they did or if they didn't. And we were able to check things to make sure they weren't doing it somewhere else. So it was verifiable, and if they did break the agreement, we would have over a year to do something about it. That's the way the agreement was designed. It was 2015 when this was put together. If Trump had left it alone, it was going fine. When he destroyed it, he tore it up because he heard Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Mark Levin and all those guys say that it was a terrible agreement. He got all his information about this agreement from talk radio. I guarantee it. I absolutely believe that. Because he's parroting exactly what they said. And it's not based in reality. It's not based in facts. Now check this out. Second, fissile material, which is necessary but an insufficient element for a bomb, you also need an explosive weapon. As of now, and there are conflicting messages coming from within the Trump administration, our intelligence agencies believe that Iran has not yet made a decision to weaponize. If and when it does, it would take Tehran 18 to 24 months to produce an explosive device, according to some estimates. In other words, there was still time for diplomacy to work, and the situation wasn't nearly the emergency that Mr. Trump portrayed it to be. So once again, as I kind of suspected in the last few days, but didn't have enough information or knowledge of this type to really know, I suspected Trump exaggerated the need. I suspected he did it way too quickly. And this proves that that was right, that my suspicion was right. And I'm sure a lot of you had the same suspicion. But this proves we were right. It didn't need to be done, and it didn't need to be done now. And if you look back on it, this happened so fast. He literally came out one day and said, oh, well, we might have to think about bombing Iran if negotiations don't work. And he gave negotiations about a week. What did he say? Did he say at one point he was going to give it 30 days or 90 days or something? And he gave it a week. And then suddenly, next thing you know, we wake up and we bombed them. Why? It's not based in reality. And everything he does, every decision he makes is never based in reality. You got this RFK guy, Robert Kennedy, as head of all of our health services, who is buried in delusions. Sorry, I know this is a different subject, but I just read today, he's appointed people to I think the CDC, advisory board or something like that on vaccines, who are all anti-vaccine. Totally not based in reality. Vaccines are good. Vaccines save millions of lives a year around the world. Are we going to live in a country soon where it's impossible to get a vaccine, even if you want one? I mean, it's obvious we're going to live in a country that's going to stop developing new vaccines and stop all the progress that we've made, which is really sad. It's a real shame. It's a tragedy to just cut all that off. Anyway, I'm getting off the subject. Blinken continues. He says, third, experts I've spoken to had real doubts about the ability of the massive ordnance penetrator, the MOP, that 30,000-pound bomb designed to reach things that are buried deep in the ground. He says the experts he's talked to had real doubts about the ability of that bomb, which is unique to America's arsenal, and that we dropped on Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. They had doubts that it could fully incapacitate the Fordo site, which is apparently the one that's buried deepest. I think it's 250 feet under a mountain, and other deeply buried or fortified components of Iran's nuclear program. Initial reports suggest that while Iran's nuclear infrastructure was severely damaged, it was not destroyed. So again, when Trump came out saying it was obliterated, I thought, can I do a show on that? Because how do we know? It's only him telling us that. Now information's coming out from this article saying that experts had doubts about its ability, this bomb's ability to do what Trump said it did. But then yesterday we got information from the Pentagon saying that they don't think it destroyed these facilities. It means they were not totally obliterated. And then he says, last but not least, fourth, in wargaming the military option during my time in the Biden administration, we were also concerned that Iran had or would spread its stockpile of uranium already enriched to just short of weapons grade to very secure sites and preserve enough centrifuges to further enrich that stockpile in short order. Now, two things to notice here. One, to my conservative and Republican friends, note, he was a Democrat. He worked in the Obama administration, and he was the Secretary of State in the Biden administration. And in the Biden administration, they did war games against Iran to play out and to work out exactly what might happen if we had to go to war, or if they wanted to go to war, or if they had a nuclear weapon. They do war games to go through all those scenarios. That's what experts do. He did it as a Democrat. They were concerned that Iran might have one of these weapons available at some point. And what would we do if they do, or if they did? That's what they were gaming out. Now, you would think, listening to to all our talk show hosts, the Democrats would never do that because they didn't even know Iran was a threat. Isn't that what we were led to believe? Listening to conservative media for the last few decades, Democrats don't even know Iran's a threat. Look, they want to negotiate. They're fools. That's what we were told. They were doing war games in the Biden administration. The administration you think such a disaster, which wasn't such a disaster in the end. But they were doing war games to play out all these situations. Anyway, he says, in that scenario, the Iranian regime could hide its near weapons grade material, green light weaponization, and sprint toward a bomb. Thus, Mr. Trump's strike has risked precipitating what we wanted to prevent. So the answer to the question, did it need to be done? No. Therefore, it did not need to be done now. And third, the fact that he's done it could possibly provoke the Iranians and make them quicker to become a nuclear nation. Now, they may achieve that goal sooner than they would have if we had left it alone, or if we had negotiated. I'm sorry, but a week to negotiate, it's not enough. That you're not showing a true intention to negotiate, and you're not showing you know anything about the art of the deal. Your art of the deal is do what I say or get bombed. That's not art, and that's not a deal. So there you have it. Again, our president and this administration has failed to do the right thing at the right time, and they're making things worse as usual. Let's hope and pray for the best. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.